The final chapter on JFK, Chapter 8, Segment 3, The Motorcade.
The Motorcade. Friday, November 22nd, 1963, in the morning, in Fort Worth, Texas. The day did not start out real well for Lyndon Johnson. It was raining. With rain, the Texas Motorcade might be canceled. Or at least they would have the tops on, the vehicles, and it wouldn't be open-topped anymore. When Johnson got up that morning, if you remember, we have him being greeted by the Life magazine article involving the scandal. We also have him knowing that he had just lost, within hours before that, an argument with Kennedy as to the seating arrangements for the motorcade. His buddy still in the car with Kennedy. And in addition, there was a hearing going on in Washington where they were going after Bobby Baker and questioning witnesses under oath, where Baker said that if it had continued, the person testifying would have gutted Johnson and it would have been over. So the morning didn't look good for Lyndon Johnson as Kennedy and the entire party walked across the street from the Hotel Texas for an impromptu speech by Kennedy to a crowd of thousands. Here are some photos of Kennedy walking across the street. Johnson, John Connally, Kennedy, Ralph Yarborough. And if you look at those photos, examine the two co-organizers of the trip's faces. That's Connally and Johnson. Look at the faces. We have about 8 more photos of Kennedy walking across the street and speaking. And if you look at those photos closely, they say that one picture can be worth 1,000 words. 8 pictures, in this case, are probably worth a textbook. After Kennedy finished his impromptu remarks to the crowd of thousands outside the Hotel Texas, he actually went into the crowd and started shaking hands with people, and even went up and shook hands with a sheriff's marshal who was seated on a horse. From that, Jackie and Jack Kennedy took another Lincoln limo to the airport, where they were going to take a short plane ride from Carswell Air Force Base to Love Field in Dallas, Texas. At 11:37 Central Standard Time, Air Force One touched down at Love Field in Dallas, Texas, quickly followed by Air Force Two holding Lyndon Johnson, his wife, and some members of their party. By the time the president and the first lady took their seats in the limo, getting ready for the motorcade departure, things were already buzzing back in Washington, D.C. The president's brother had just received in his office a thick file on the association between Vice President Johnson and the mobster Carlos Marcello. As the motorcade left, there was a pilot car that traveled ahead of the motorcade approximately a quarter of a mile. Following on the side were motorcycles who were really involved with just crowd control and to keep the crowd from entering into the roadway and impede the motorcade. The lead car was driven by Chief Jesse Curry, along with the Dallas Sheriff Decker and 2 Secret Service special agents. Kennedy's limousine followed after that, and it was driven by William Greer, and in the passenger seat was Agent Roy Kellerman, with the President and Mrs. Kennedy at the back of the limo, and Governor Connally and Mrs. Connally seating in the jump seats of the limo. Behind Kennedy's limousine was a 1955 Cadillac that had running boards on its side, carrying a total of 8 agents. Unknown to Kennedy, any of his staff, or the Secret Service, Dallas Police Protection stopped 1 block short of the full motorcade route. The Dallas Police, Jesse Curry, decided in advance to end their security protection just short at the intersection of Houston and Main, and this was done without disclosure or consent from the Secret Service or the White House staff. This senseless decision came to light only after the assassination. The motorcade route started with the presidential limo and the trailing vehicles going down Lemon Avenue in Dallas, heading to Turtle Creek, and then turning and going down Cedar Spring Road, all to thousands of people lining the streets, almost crushing the motorcade, including people viewing and hanging out of windows looking at the president and his wife. At the intersection of Main and Houston streets, the motorcade made a slow right turn onto Houston. It then proceeded down Houston for 1 full block, traveling directly toward the Texas School Book Depository. The limousine then made a slow, wide, angling turn onto Elm Street, directly in front of the Texas School Book Depository. And the limousine then began traveling down and away from the Texas School Book Depository along a corridor of trees towards a railroad underpass heading for the Stevens Expressway. Shots rang out. It was 12:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. The exact number of shots fired is still disputed. Some witnesses heard 3, 4, others many more. Of importance is that when the shots rang out, and there is a photograph taken by a journalist by the name of Alchins, Kennedy is shot in the throat in that photo. Of perhaps even greater interest, if you look at the limousine that Lyndon Johnson was in, you actually enlarge it with those first shots. Lyndon Johnson does not appear in the photograph. This large man in the back seat next to his wife isn't there. He's ducking down below his seat. With the first shots, Lyndon Johnson, for some reason, is ducking down in his seat all by himself. And if you look at all of the other people in all of the other vehicles, and even in the roadway and on the sidewalks, no one's leaping to the ground. No one's doing anything aside from turning their head because they hear an unusual noise. No one except Lyndon Baines Johnson, the co-organizer of the JFK trip and of the Dallas Motorcade. The co-organizer who wanted to get his buddy, John Connally, out of the presidential limousine the night before. As the motorcade continues on, John Connally, the other co-organizer of the trip and co-organizer of the motorcade, and the man who flew to Washington to urge Kennedy to still make the trip to Texas, he's also hit by a bullet. And by all accounts, and even John Connally's own testimony, when he was hit, he had no idea that John F. Kennedy or anyone else had been shot. When John Connally was hit, the first and only words he said were, "Oh my God, they're going to kill us all." That is known as an excited utterance. I have it up here. An excited utterance, a statement relating to a startling event or condition made while the declarant was under the stress of excitement that it caused. The reason this is so important is in law. An excited utterance is deemed to be trustworthy and unlikely to be a lie or premeditated falsehood. An excited utterance is admissible in the federal rules of evidence. To prove the truth of the statement means to persuade the finder of fact to believe the affirmative sense of the truth of that statement. Now, isn't it interesting that in this motorcade, the two prevalent items that come out of it. That is, the one co-host, Lyndon Johnson, when the shooting starts, is ducking down. And the other co-host, when the shooting starts and he's hit, is saying, oh my God, they're going to kill us all. The Dallas Motorcade did not end well for anybody except Lyndon Baines Johnson. And as a result of that motorcade, his lifelong dream of becoming a president was finally achieved. From the motorcade, we did learn some very interesting items. One, Lyndon Johnson, as one of the co-organizers of the trip, when the shots went off, was ducking down below the seat of the limo he was in. No one else around him, no one in the car, no one in any of the other cars was ducking. He was ducking down. That, of course, was consistent with what Senator Ralph Yarborough said, and that was, for what he could see, being only 4 feet or 3 feet away, was ducking down in the limo at various times, listening to either a radio or a walkie-talkie. The other co-organizer, John Conley, the other man who was shot, his excited utterance saying, oh my God, they are going to kill us all, gives some indication that he suspected that something bad may also happen. From these facts and this evidence, it seems clear that the two co-organizers of Kennedy's Texas trip knew that something bad was going to happen. See you in the next segment.